I think the audience is always aware on some level of the difference between things that are animated and something that's been photographed.
You kind of realize when you read it, oh, how are we going to do this? Because he's going to want to do this for real.
On my films, I try to shoot as much in camera as possible. On Interstellar, my last film, for example, we didn't use any green screens. So when we were shooting inside a spaceship, we had views outside the windows. We produced all that material and we shot it and achieved the effect in camera. And visual effects technology has been wonderful for enhancing those things and increasing the vocabulary. But sometimes when you're asked to justify these things like not using green screen, you have to just bring it down to, well, it's so much more fun to do it. It's fun for the actors, it's fun for me. There's nothing more dispiriting than when you turn up to work and there's just a green screen with a couple of actors in front of it. It's really, the magic's not there. So trying to do these things for real, trying to use real locations. I've always preferred real locations to sets for the same reason. There's a feeling of reality, there's a feeling of being somewhere that matters. So, I avail myself of all the latest digital effects technology, absolutely. But we try and always achieve what we can in camera and have as good a time as possible doing it.
Chris is really, he loves doing things in camera. So there's a whole sort of set of reasons why things should be in camera. And for me, sort of first and foremost is if you do things in camera, you can maintain the biggest amount of resolution and clarity in your IMAX frames. The other reason is that nobody of us still believed that sort of the viscerality of that reality and the way that space works, that it's something is that you could potentially invent later and do in post. So yes, we felt we have to do this as much as possible in camera. So you always end up engineering and rethinking and thinking how you can make things work so that they work in camera. A lot of real nice analog film trickery everywhere. It's there's just very little trust during a shoot like that. Computers will solve our problems. We always sort of assume that we have to sort of do everything in camera as much as we can, and computers are kind of our last resort for when it doesn't work out. But there's this very sort of overlaying ambition all the time to try to get it, and if you can't get it, you have to figure out ways that you will get it.
See, that's also one of the things that I can hook onto as a cinematographer, and that is part of the prep. That is exactly working those kind of things out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he is a very big believer, and to a certain extent make me a very big believer, or I was already a believer of it. With his presence, it became more like a religion, you could say. But, it doesn't matter how crazy it gets, but if you can do it for real and you can film it for real, you should do it. They put a lot of energy and a lot of effort in the pre-production rather than the post-production. Like on Interstellar, we had this ambition. We have to work with back projection. We have to every time when we look outside the windows and so on, we don't want to do CGI. We don't want to do green screen. We want to try to project it and try to make it. But that also means that all the content that normally post is doing has to now be done before the fact. So the visual effects post supervisor is actually creating very advanced content for us to project in it, so that everything can be in camera. So visual effects plays a very big role in making that happen as well. Like when you see the wormhole in Interstellar, right, which is that weird sphere in space.
Yeah,
that's that whole sequence, or that's most of it is projection. It's all in camera stuff that we did, but the content that you see, the actual wormhole, is done by a good post house.
Neither one of us have time to worry about relativity right now, Dr. Brand.
sorry, Cooper.
But for me, film will always have this wonderful richness, the analog color, it has the superior resolution. And when film is projected, the way it was originally intended to be seen, the way you shot the film, you project the film, there's a very unique experience for the audience there that they can't get in their living rooms. And I think that's something that's very, very important. Obviously, I'm aware that we're dealing with relative subtleties, but people often misunderstand just how sophisticated the human eye is and how it develops over time. And so, for example, you know, I grew up in a generation where when you switch on the television, you know, in the 80s and 90s, you could tell within a couple of shots, within 5 or 10 seconds, whether you were watching a feature film being shown on television, a news program, a drama, a television commercial. Everybody's very sensitized to the differences in imaging technology. They might not understand it. They might not be able to say, this is why this looks this way, this is why that looks that way, and nor should they. But in terms of being sensitized to it and it having an effect on the way they perceive the story they're being shown, that's inarguable. That's a very powerful component of what cinema has always been. And when people look at movies and say, well, if we do it more like television, if we use video technology as opposed to film technology, it won't have an impact. A lot of the people who were telling me that, you know, 10 years ago, and now the people saying that younger audiences aren't as interested in films as they used to be. They're more interested in television, for example. And so I think there's a very real danger with watering down the theatrical experience, watering down the experience of what a film is, that organic, larger-than-life sort of quality that a great film print has.
I've spent a lot of time over the last few years really defending film, celluloid film, and really trying to articulate coherent arguments for why it's so important to me and to other filmmakers who love it. Essentially, on a technical level, it comes down to it's a better analogy for the way the eye sees than video formats. So it has analog color. There's no banding of the color. It's not subject to any particular bit depth, like 10-bit or 12-bit color. The resolution is very, very high. I mean, an IMAX film frame, it doesn't have an equivalent digital resolution because it's an analog format with a random grain structure, but it would be about 18K minimum or something. So it's just it's a whole different order of magnitude of what you can achieve in terms of how the eye sees. And so if you're making a film where you want the tone of the film to be such that you're sort of seeing the world the way you see it, not a heightened reality, film's the best way to do that. And I think one of the reasons it's been under such threat in the last, 10 years particularly, is that a lot of what's driving the box office with the studios are films that don't require that naturalism. They tend to have a very predominantly CG sort of look. They tend to be patterned. I mean, CG animation has been a huge factor in the box office in the last 10 years. And so those things, they don't miss out. But when you want to make a film that looks like the world around us, films are the best tool for doing it.
For me, it comes very much from sort of the humbleness towards, the extreme viscerality of the IMAX format itself. I mean, it's it's like a gigantic window of emulsion, and it has such an ability to capture details in such a beautiful way. I don't know. It's something that I feel very sort of humbled by it, and I really, there's not one situation from which I wish that we film like, even if we shoot it on 65.5, like, we have it constantly. We wish that we have registered this on an IMAX camera, because we can never do that again. And it's there's something so monumental with that format that. And in a way, I don't know, but I felt that very much for Chris, like the amount of respect that he has towards the things that he shoots, but not only for the way that he wants it to see or feel right now, but also, for the future, for the fact is that we are all there with a gigantic team, and this is already a monumental sort of effort. But now it's our job as filmmaker to overcome those technicalities and make sure that we register it also on, the best that we can or the best that we have.
No, there was just a sort of a very enthusiastic hunger to just try to do as much as possible in IMAX, because it's literally, it's like the clearest and most sort of generous and tactile eye into the world. You know, there's just no better format out there than that. So.